So if you missed class, we are doing 3, 4, and 5 for Grammar Unit 1, Exercise 6. So we said the challenging thing with this exercise is that we have a new pattern with a noun phrase to direct object, and these sentences could also be sort of any pattern. So it's going to be really, really important that we're following the sentence analysis process very precisely, thinking about the meaning of the sentence. So we look at number 3, the ugly duckling turned into a beautiful swan. If we find our verb, turned, and then we look for prepositions, we realize we have a little bit of a conundrum. So we've got the ugly duckling and a beautiful swan are noun phrases, so we have to group those together. So looking at what we've grouped, we could potentially have a intransitive verb, right, without the preposition, right, changing directions, with the preposition, some sort of a metamorphosis or a transformation, or we could have it without the preposition, and the preposition could be a prepositional phrase, okay? So we have to decide, is the ugly duckling changing its direction? Is it transforming or metamorphosizing into something? Or are we like ramming something? You know, it's turning into like it's, you know, a guardrail or something. So collision on the pond, transformation, or directional change. So in this sentence, you know, ducklings become swans. That's kind of a fairy tale. So if you don't have that kind of background knowledge, this is a tricky sentence. So it'd be easier if it says the you know, fuzzy caterpillar turned into the beautiful butterfly. That would be easier to understand. So what we really do want meaning-wise is we want that preposition inside of our verb lines. The ugly duckling transformed. Okay. So when you think about this sentence, if you say into a beautiful swan, the ugly duckling turned, now we've got a collision in the pond, right? So that doesn't work to move it. So that tells you it kind of has to be there. It has to be part of that verb. So going across the top row, the ugly duckling is noun phrase 1. It's the same thing as the beautiful swan. So noun phrase 1, right? Just because it got older doesn't necessarily mean it's a different thing. And so it's not part, it's a whole transformation. So when we look at noun phrase 1 to the left of our verb, noun phrase 1 to the right of our verb, the only sentences that have that are sentence 3, right, with a be verb, or sentence 5 with a linking verb. And since it's not is, am, are, was, or were, it's going to be a linking verb. And so that tells us that we have to fill in here our subject and our subject complement. So this is actually sentence pattern 5. Take a look at number 4. The fog comes on little cat feet. So Carl Sandburg, part of a piece of poetry that he wrote here. So we say comes as our verb, on is a preposition, and so is, we have the fog and little cat feet are 2 noun phrases. So is the fog arriving, right? Is it having inappropriate feelings about little cat feet? Probably not. So what we have here is how the fog arrives, and this is a how. So, noun phrase 1, so that's our prepositional phrase, and it's how, which makes it an adverb. So we draw our arrow to our verb, and if all you have to the right of your verb is adjective or adverbs, then you know you have an intransitive verb, right? Because see, you can have as many little adverb things as you want to the right because they're optional, but you don't have an important thing, right? It's not a be verb. Adjective, noun, noun phrase 2, okay? So intransitive verb, subject, and that makes it pattern 6. All right, so flip it over onto the back. On Sundays, the neighbor across the hall walks his dog at 6 a.m. So what's going on in our sentence? Walks. We have a whole bunch of prepositions. So on, across, and at. None of them are compound. And so if the preposition is not to the right of the verb, it's not going to be a particle. And so as long as there's a noun after it and it makes sense, it's going to be a prepositional phrase. Every once in a while you have a preposition that's an adverb, but you know, if you circle the prepositions and you don't have anything else left to the left of your verb, and double check, make sure you haven't accidentally absorbed the subject. In this case though, the neighbor we recognize as the person doing the walking, and so we're okay there. So to the right of our verb, there's a noun phrase in between that verb and that preposition. So if you've got a whole noun phrase splitting up the verb, you've got either like a significant kind of meaning grammar kind of problem, and so you don't have to worry too much about at 6 a.m. because it's not close enough to the verb to belong as a particle. Okay. So when we look at our sentence, we've taken care of our prepositional phrases, and this is why we circle them, because the sentence is a lot easier to see without those prepositions. The neighbor walks his dog, right? All of these are going to be adjectives or adverbs. We just have to figure out which. So we draw our lines. Going across the top row without those prepositions, we've got the neighbor is one thing, and to the right of the verb, his dog is different than the neighbor. So that's noun phrase 2, which tells us we have a transitive verb. So with a transitive verb, we have a subject, and we have a direct object. So now let's figure out what these prepositional phrases are. So on Sundays is at the very beginning, and so it can only really be an adverb because we don't have a noun before it that it could possibly be an adjective to sort of modify. Across the hall, on the other hand, could be where the neighbor walks the dog, or it could be which neighbor. And so remember, if you've got a situation where a prepositional phrase could be an adverb or it could be an adjective, the adjective is going to win. So the neighbor is going to be which neighbor, making this an adjective. Right, on Sundays is when. That was an adverb. As long as you circle the prepositional phrase and draw your arrow, you don't necessarily have to write the question. You don't have to necessarily write anything in the boxes below it. So at 6 a.m. doesn't make sense. There's no different kind of at 6 a.m. dog. So that doesn't make any sense to be an adjective. And so that's really going to be a time. So that's another when. So doesn't change the pattern of the sentence no matter how many little adjective and adverb prepositional phrases or even single word adverbs that you add to your sentence. You could have like, shockingly, if you're not a morning person, right? And then that would just sort of be adverb, right? And it wouldn't change the pattern of the sentence. So this is a pattern 7. Okay, so 6 through 10 are independent practice, and I'll see you next class.